Happy New Year, dear listeners. It is so great to be back in your ears. And an extra special happy midterms year to all of you friendly voters out there. You know, while the midterms, I'm holding on to that word. I'm just rolling it over in my mind. And while the midterms seem far away, a pesky little thing happened that I will be reminding you about until they're over. Because if you're planning to vote by mail, it will affect you. Oh, yes, that is right. I have some serious choice words for the goons at the USPS who recently changed the rules around postmark dates. Now, your mail, whether it be your taxes, bills, or, yes, your ballot, might not be postmarked the day you drop it off, as it previously had been, which allows it to be counted even if it arrives after Election Day, okay? Instead, now it might not be postmarked for a few additional days when it arrives at a processing hub. If it sounds confusing to you, then I agree with you. Everything is meant to confuse us these days. So listen, vote early. I wish I could vote today, but not today early, just as early as possible. I wish I could vote today and every day until the midterms, but that is not legal. And that's a joke I made. I'm not actually gonna try to do that. Oh. This is Choice Words. I'm Samantha B. My guest this week is author and economics professor Emily Oster. And she is incredible at clearing up confusion with data. And while I have you, certainly it might be cold out right now, but spring is coming. And I just added spring dates to my How to Survive Menopause tour. Go to samanthab.com to see if I'm coming to your neck of the woods. Until then, take a listen and make good choices. Thank you so much for being here. It feels like the perfect time to be talking to you, actually.
Good.
I'm getting good vibes. I'm very familiar with your work. I admire the work that you do. I wish that you had been more present in my life when I was having little children of my own. My kids are a little older now.
Yeah. Your kids are older than mine, so I wasn't doing this work until...
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. And I think that I'm maybe most familiar with your work from your TED Talk, from Super Freakonomics, from all the writing that you do about pregnancy and parenting, and all your work on Instagram around parenting, which is really so completely interesting to me and totally pragmatic. And I love talking and thinking about research integrity and panic headlines. And this is really what you do.
That's what I do. Totally.
It's
also my favorite thing.
Yes. So I guess before we launch into our conversation, because it's the first real week back of January. Why do you think that people cling to the idea of a reset in January? Do you make resolutions? Do you do that?
Like everyone else, I cleaned out my house of all of the boxes I had been storing for a year on January 2nd. I think as humans, we need like definitive times to set goals. And there is something inherent about the beginning of the year, as there is about, say, the beginning of the school year. It feels like an opportunity to revisit things that we wish were different. I also think for many people, the excesses of December are leading them to January is a particularly good time because you feel the excesses and you think, I want to do something different.
Right.
I'm tired of cookies.
By January, you're like, everything has to have citrus in it. Literally everything I eat has to be astringent, and it needs to taste like a bitter lemon.
Totally.
For 1 month. Exactly. I have read, and I think I might have even talked about it on the Freakonomics podcast. We talked about choice a lot and how I think that people make a about 35,000 choices in one day. Does that feel
Sounds
like
something
in the
like
realm?
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that decision makers, like good decision makers, are always weighing the right the right things when we're making our choices?
I think the core to good decision making is probably to figure out which choices you need to make, which choices are important and which are less important, and to prioritize the things that are important and give those the attention that they need and not obsess about every choice. But I also think that people who are really good decision makers probably make some decisions once and then don't revisit this. It's a little bit like, why did Steve Jobs wear the same clothes every day? Part of that is branding, fair enough. But part of it is, there's a choice overload that we all have. And if every morning you wake up and you are making a million choices that seem very, very, very just tiny choices, that you don't have the energy for the more important decisions. And so my guess is that if you looked at people who are very busy, whose job depends on them making good decisions, like at work, you would find that, for example, they eat the same thing every day. That they don't ever think, there's like the thing where you're standing in front of the fridge and you're like, what should I have for breakfast? Those people are like, every day I have Greek yogurt with nuts and fruit. Or every day I have this for lunch, because then I never think about it.
Right. Do you do that? Do you have the same thing for breakfast every day? I do that. I definitely do that.
Yeah, I have the same thing for breakfast and lunch every day.
You too? Can I ask what it is? I'm so curious.
Sure. Yes, I eat a lot of different breakfasts. But because I eat and then I exercise and then I eat again. I eat oatmeal with fruit and toast with butter. And then I have a turkey sandwich with hummus and microgreens. And then sometimes I have fruit and sometimes I have vegetables. So that's like a lot of choice variety. But sometimes that's too much. It's choice overload. Like, do I want carrots or grapes? It's hard. I should just stick with one.
I really am thinking, you're reminding me of that scene. Did you see The Hurt Locker? Did you see that movie?
Yes.
Yes. Remember when Jeremy Renner comes back and he's in the grocery store just confronted in the cereal aisle by the hundreds of cereals that we have.
It's too many cereals.
It's too many cereals.
It's too many cereals.
It's too many cereals. How do you effectively since this show is called Choice Words, how do you make decisions for yourself and your family?
So my husband is also an economist, and I would say that we do a fair amount of for important choices, a fair amount of kind of what I'd refer to, I guess, structured decision making. So thinking about what is the choice, trying to collect the information that we need to make the choice, and then make a decision. We do a lot of work over email. I think relative to many people's decision-making processes, we probably have far more structure, and we try much harder to divide the decision into these pieces. So you're not just talking about what's an interesting vacation, but more okay, what is there's one choice, which is where are we going to go on vacation? There's another choice about what we're going to do on vacation. And so then we try to separate them. So we're talking about them separately. And so we're getting all the information before we make some decisions.
So it's really information gathering. I had this conversation with my mother a lot this very morning. I was like, we need a list. We need 10 strategy planning, strategic planning, I guess. We need 10 options on this list, and then kind of game out informationally. Information is power.
10 options is too many, but I think it's exactly right that the first step in decision making should be to frame your question and say, what are the concrete options that we have that we could choose between? So, we're thinking about, I talked to a lot of parents who are thinking about preschools. People will be like, what's the right preschool? It's well, I don't know, or should I send my kid to daycare or not? Well, that's a very poor question, because or not is not a childcare solution. So you really want to say, here are the 3 options. Here's the 3 things we could do. And then we get some information about them, and then we make a decision. But that first step of actually saying, what are the things we could realistically do, often we miss that. And then we're in a morass of kind of discussing all the possible eventualities, all the possible choices we could ever make, even though many of them are not completely infeasible and we couldn't ever make them.
Right. And sometimes seeing a potential negative outcome actually obliterates all kind of rationality in the conversation. And then you just end up shelving it and pushing it down the line.
And without recognizing that all of the outcomes have negatives, that there's very unlikely, especially if choices are hard, it's very unlikely that some choice is like completely dominant and is perfect in every way, or else you would already be doing that. It would already be obvious, right? If the decision is hard, it's hard because there are trade-offs. And if we, get to the point where we see, well, here's a downside of this, and then we're like, oh, forget it, then we've kind of dismissed many things and we end up perhaps with not the best outcome.
Do you ever find yourself saying to people who are, I'm not sure that I take this advice myself, but when people are seeking my advice, which doesn't happen all that often, but does happen, where the options are just so, where all the things on the table are so confusing and chaotic that I often end up just saying, like, sometimes the best decision is to do nothing. Like, you need to maybe just hold on this.
So I would say that is a decision. So doing nothing is a choice, and sometimes that is the right choice. You could say, well, we could decide this now, or we could decide to wait, and we could decide to wait to talk about this later at a time when we have more capacity to think about it, or we know more about the options, or more information has revealed itself. I think that's very powerful because it lets people know that they have made an active choice and that there is a possibility of doing something differently later. So let me give you an example. A lot of people I talk to are co-sleeping with their kids, and they don't want to be. Some people love co-sleeping, but some people, like, we sort of happened into it and, like, I don't like it. But fixing the problem, like getting your kid to sleep in their own bed, is actually a pretty significant investment. It requires, like, taking a 2 or 3 week period, deciding you're going to do it, talking about it, getting your kid in their bed, returning them to their bed. It's tiring. It's just like, it's an investment. You can totally do it, but it's an investment. And when I talk to people about this, I tell them, you can choose, you can sort of sit down and say, here's one option. And then the other option, it's not to do nothing. It's to wait. It's to say, like, let me decide. I'm going to live with this for now. That's not the same as living it with forever. I'm going to decide to revisit this in 2 months and see if we have the capacity then. And that can be a very powerful emotional tool because it kind of tells you, I'm not giving up on this. This is not going to be the way it is forever. It's just the way it is until I have the capacity or I have it. So I'm in a different place to fix it. I think that kind of recognition is pretty powerful for a lot of people.
Do you ever, because I used to write a blog actually about parenting with one of my best friends. And it is such fraught terrain for people. Like did you have a sense before writing and talking about parenting became your job, like the meat of what you've been doing, did you have an understanding that was like poking a hornet's nest, the likes of which I have never experienced?
Basically, no.
Okay.
Basically, no. I mean, I have continually been surprised at the things that people can get exercised about. And what I think is interesting about parenting is, of course, there are many very important topics where I guess it's not that surprising that people get exercised about it. When people really want to fight about sleep training or breastfeeding or something like that, I can see why, because it's such an important part of your experience of parenting that it might get people exercised. Although they are more exercised than I anticipated. But people also get exercised about things where I cannot believe, so I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I did a podcast recently where I said that my family generally, when my kids were younger, would not go to birthday parties on Sunday mornings because we reserve that for family time. Okay, that's what I said. Like, generally, we would not choose to go to a birthday party on a Sunday morning because we like to be together as a family.
Right.
People freaked out.
What?
Somebody wrote a newspaper column. I'm not making this up. Somebody wrote a newspaper column about this, which was like, ended with some statement like spouses leave, kids grow up, and everybody dies. And you're contributing to the loneliness epidemic by not going to the birthday parties. Like, it was so, but generally that it was such a, I was like, how are people getting so exercise? It was very odd. But it was such a window into, we're thinking so much about our parenting and doing all these things, like somehow every moment feels very fraught. And it's hard to see, like, to just be like, yeah, there's like a lot of good ways to do this, like some of which involve birthdays and some of which don't.
Right. People do things in all kinds of different ways. And I
Yeah.
feel like this is such interesting terrain for me to talk about because I feel like I unleashed some torrent of criticism when I talked about breastfeeding. I breastfed my kids. I made some joke about my boobs elongating and becoming like tennis balls in a tube sock. It was like a joke. I'm like, it's a joke. And the amount,
Not necessarily wrong, but funny.
Funny. It's just like a joke. Like, I'm like, they're not really like that, but like, fine. And they were like, people wrote to me and they were like, you bitch, you are gonna make people, like, they were accusing me of like defiling the sanctity of breastfeeding. Like I was gonna turn generations of people off the art of breastfeeding because I talked honestly about how hard it was for me to like start breastfeeding. It was really painful. And I have my own theories about why it was so. And I actually couldn't believe it. And as someone who like worked in political comedy, I was like, wow, the most criticism I've ever received actually was when I wrote about how breastfeeding really hurt for about 6 weeks and I cried a lot, but I got through it.
Yeah, I will say when I told people they should forgive each other, like from the right and the left after COVID, people were angrier about that. That's the only thing I've ever said that made people madder than things about breastfeeding and infant sleep was when I told people that they should forgive each other after COVID. They were not ready. They were not ready to forgive. Not ready. Not ready.
Well, now I think people would prefer to forget that it occurred at all. Which is also interesting. They would really like, I was like, I think I understand now why we never heard of this Spanish influenza.
No. People were like, forget it. It happened.
It's over.
But let's not talk about it.
It's just whatever. Let's bury it. Let's bury it in a hole.
It's a blip.
Yeah.
It's a blip.
Is there a big choice in your own life that you think of when you think of like big choices that didn't even maybe seem large at the time, but really reverberated in your life in a way that was unexpected to you?
The most significant, so many years ago now, 15 years ago, I decided to write Expecting Better, which is the book I wrote on pregnancy. And I was working as a professor, and this was not a sort of typical thing to do. And it was an incredibly momentous decision, which set me on a very different career path in many, many ways. And I did not think about it like very much at all. It was like one of those decisions where like, this would be fun. And then I was like, I guess I'll just do it. And I remember like writing a little bit, like, I enjoy this. Like I wrote like an introduction and a chapter, and then I sent it to someone who was like a book agent, and she was like, great, let's sell it. And of course now as an older person who has done more books and has more of an experience, I understand that was very lucky and unusual, but it sort of reinforced the fact that I didn't kind of think about this at all, even though I should have given it a tremendous amount of thought. It worked out fine.
It worked out. It really worked out great. What was the impetus for writing the book?
I was pregnant and I could not believe what was going on. Like just the experience that I had in terms of people kind of not wanting to engage with the many, many questions that I had and the many, many places where I felt like that can't really be what the data says. You know, there are a lot of rules and not a lot of evidence. And I just kept like digging and digging and digging because, you know, that's my job. I mean, I'm a research professor, and I kept digging and digging and digging and being like, well, the things people are telling me are not quite right. And then that was the impetus. And then I just started writing because I like to write, basically.
Right. So people are like, you cannot have a turkey sandwich for the next 9 months and don't ask any further questions.
Don't ask any follow-up. Yeah. Or, you know, you're 31 years old, so this is the kind of prenatal testing. And I'd be like, well, can you tell me more about like why? And they were like, well, no, because you're 31. So this is the system. And I was just like, but that's not how data works. Like, that's not how data works. There's not some magical, like, you know, old person stick that you get hit with at 35. Like, this just isn't the way evidence is. And I was very frustrated.
It's a very frustrating experience. And I do feel like when you travel to other places, because I'm originally from Canada, and I do think that, like, do you feel like when you travel to other countries, the approach is slightly different? Because I feel like having lived on both sides, straddling this border a little bit, there's a certain type of, everyone in Canada will hate that I'm about to say this. There's a farmer-like pragmatism in Canada where we're just a little bit more inclined to be like, well, wouldn't make sense to my grandmother. So I think I'll just do it the way that we are a little more empowered decision-making wise in our bodies.
Maybe. I will say that there are a lot of different superstitions in different places, but they're not all the same. So, you know, in Sweden, people feel that if you swaddle your baby, this is my Swedish friends will be like, you don't understand. If you swaddle your baby, people will be like, they're never going to walk, like you're ruining their legs. Which is like not true. Like that's not true. And, you know, when I was pregnant, I had a Chinese colleague and he was like, you know, are you wearing the radiation vest? And I was like, sorry, what? And he's like, if you're sitting in front of your computer all day, you have to be wearing a special vest so the baby doesn't get radiation. I was like, I'm sorry. Like, that's not, we don't have that here, you know? And so everybody's got their own things, every culture. And I mean, maybe one way to figure out which are the things that are important is just to say, like, which are the things everybody has? Like, nobody thinks it's a good idea to smoke. And so maybe just that's like a good one. Whereas like only a few places think you can't eat ice. So it's probably fine to eat ice.
Right. Yes. Oh, that's funny. Growing up, all my friends were Polish. I grew up in a Polish neighborhood, and I would sometimes take a drink put a drink in the fridge to cool it down. And my friends' parents were like, no, you can't eat hot foods with a cold drink. You will die. It's
like the people who are like, if the breeze is coming in, I have like a Bosnian friend, and they have this thing about like if the crosswind, like you have to keep the window closed because a crosswind that you'll die.
Yeah.
Why is it always like you'll die? Yeah,
you'll die.
That's it. You're dead.
You'll die if you're not wearing
right there.
If you're not wearing a ski hat in a movie theater and you get a draft on the back of your neck, you're dead.
You're dead.
You're just dead.
Oh well.
Speaking of getting a breeze across the back of your neck and instantly dropping dead. We really are awash in trash science right now. How is that impacting your daily life? Are you waking up in the morning and not engaging, or what level of driving you crazy is occurring in your body and soul?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't feel like I'm in a position to wake up and draw my turtleneck over my face because this is my job, sort of. I mean, I spend an awful lot of time like trying to explain to people why some of the things that are happening in the health information space are not correct, and trying to hit the center a bit and help people like actually process, what's real and what's not real. How much is what RFK Jr. is saying, how much of that is true, how much of that is not true, how will it actually affect your life? I mean, I tend to go for a pretty practical approach. And so what people really want to know is like, is this going to, how is this going to change my access to things? What's it going to change policy? So but it's really a dumpster fire.
It is a dumpster fire. I mean, I think we can all agree that we do our best exercising when we're shirtless in jeans, but that's...
Yeah, I was running on the indoor track this morning, shirtless in my jeans.
In your jeans.
It was great. Totally. Doing pull-ups.
A nice denim workout. It actually does seem a little bit quaint to talk about the Overton window and how many times it has shifted in the past year. I think about, I was kind of touring a show, and I went to a town in Michigan where it was like the first town where they had put fluoride in the water. And there's a monument to it, right at the water source, like right kind of by the lake or the river, some body of water. And I feel such a loss. I feel such a sense of loss. I feel like, how do you think that we pull back, I guess, from a public health perspective when all of this is over?
Oof.
I don't know. That's a 10-year question.
No,
I don't know.
It's a good question. I mean, it's a good question. I think part of what is so tricky is that if we go back, 5 years to COVID that no one wants to remember, the public health establishment,
right,
people who are at the CDC, really lost a lot of trust on the right. And honestly, for some good reasons. There were like some really good things that happened and some reasonable things people said. And then there were some real overreactions and some things people were told that were not true. Yeah. So I think at this point, almost nobody trusts the CDC. And that is a really problematic because, of course, this is an organization that does have a lot of responsibilities. And I think, there are thousands of people who work there and they put out really good information, much of which is nothing to do with politics and is just information. But when we get into a place where people are just not at all trusting what organizations like this are saying, then the question is, who are you going to trust? And then everybody's picking their own person to trust. And that's really, really complicated.
Do you think that we have, I guess I can't even form this as a question. I feel like I observe that people in this country or people all around me expect for science to just be like this finite yes and no, black and white, that no answer can evolve over time, that if somebody says something from the scientific community, that is the rule and that's the law, and that it can't possibly shift. And I mean, if that were the case, we would still have I learned about dinosaurs that existed in the Flintstones. Our knowledge has grown over time. Knowledge grows over time. Why do we not give any space to the scientific community to have a theory about something, enact in the best way that they can imagine in the moment, and then kind of shift or information grows? Why do we not have that grace? I guess the stakes are very high.
So
I don't know.
I think a piece of this is that the scientific community does not do a good job in explaining to people that is how science works and in communicating uncertainty. So, when we convey public health information, it is often with a degree of certainty that we probably don't have. I mean, COVID was a very extreme example of this, but I think in general, we tell people things like, you have to cook all of your meat into, 180 degrees or 160 degrees or something, without explaining, here is what might happen if you lower it, here is the size of the risk. When there's new information, we tend to sort of tell people, here is what is right. based on what we know now without saying, but here's what we're trying to learn. And I'm going to come back later and tell you, that something is updated. And so then I don't think we should be very surprised when people react to that by not really trusting people when they change their mind. So like a good example is like peanuts. Right. So for like many, many, many years, doctors and public health officials told parents, don't give your kids peanuts because it will increase their risk of allergies. Wait until your kid is 2 to give them peanuts. Then there was some new data that came out that suggested that that advice was not only like neutral, but actually actively negative, that early introduction of peanut products lowers the risk of peanut allergies by like a huge amount. The effect is enormous. And then parents started hearing, give your kids peanuts, when they're 6 months old. It's not that there's anything wrong. That's like exactly how the scientific method should work. But when someone, for their first kid, like I heard for my first kid, they were like, don't give her any peanuts. And then for the second kid, they were like, give him peanuts right away. I understood that because A, I know how science works, and B, like my job is to learn about this data. But for most people, that sort of feels like, well, you told me this other thing before. Now you're telling me this. Like, what is this? Just some kind of like random number generator? And that does not engender trust. And we don't always take the time that people need to explain why we thought the first thing and why we changed our mind.
When you had your first child and your child was an infant, did you
No, we waited.
You waited.
We waited because that was before the peanut trials. Yeah, we waited.
You waited.
She's not allergic.
Right.
Yeah. That's good. Lucky.
Yeah. We really want someone to tell us what to do.
I think that's the other thing, right? I mean, and that's what's so hard for doctors. Like when we talk about shared decision making, we say like, oh, you have shared decision making with your patients. A lot of patients are like, what do you mean shared decision? Like you went to medical school. Like, why should I make this decision? Like, and I think there's a kind of happy medium there, which is to recognize that a patient, an individual, is an expert on their own preferences, but not really on medicine. The doctor is kind of an expert on medicine, but not on what the patients need. And ideally, those things come together for good decision making, but that combination is really hard.
People must reach out to you constantly, asking you what to do in their own personal lives. What is the bulk of the questions that you receive? Is it in a certain area, vaccines, something like that?
I get some questions on vaccines. I get a lot of questions on like, can I do blah while I'm breastfeeding?
Right.
Can I get Botox? People love Botox. I don't know if you're into Botox. I get a lot of Botox questions. Like, can I have Botox and GLP-1s while I'm breastfeeding? It's like, and then I get a lot of just, I'm really anxious about the following thing that happened. I'm really worried that I hurt my baby with this thing. I took a hot bath. I went outside. Like, people are really anxious. I mean, I think I serve a particularly anxious population, but also I think that anxiety during pregnancy and early parenting is like a core experience for a lot of people. And many of the questions I get are just, I'm really worried about something. Can you talk me off the ledge?
It's such an interesting development from how, and again, I can only speak to the Canadian parent body, but like how I was born in 1969 and definitely like just a bunch of farmers, and all the women were like, I smoked and drank all the way through my pregnancy. You turned out fine. Like just an interesting, like to have been born in that, coming out of that era when they're like, I dropped so much acid when I was pregnant with you. And look, you made something out of your life and you're like, fine. Okay, you're fine. To transition into everybody reading What to Expect When You're Expecting, everybody, literally everybody in my generation, and being so panicked kind of about every little thing.
Everything.
When as a Canadian farmer, I'm like, well, we'd probably be fine if you just don't eat like alfalfa sprouts. Like they're actually...
I think we've given people the impression that like every moment is an opportunity to mess up.
Yes.
Like to ruin everything. And that's a really hard way to live. And a lot of the things I try to tell people are like, yeah, like you can, like, there are, things that matter for kids growing up, but they're actually much more basic than you think. It's like the things that are really important are like, does your kid have enough to eat? Do they have a stable place to sleep? Like, are they not exposed to toxic stress? And, do somebody read them a few books? Like, there are some pretty basic needs, but it is not as easy to screw up. And if you rush your kid out the door in the morning one day because they won't get their effing shoes on, and like you just have to go and you just put them in the car seat and you throw their shoes next to them and you drive them to school and and they're screaming, like, that's fine. That's not forever. That's not gonna, that's not gonna show up when they're 50 and, in their like divorce. Right? I think people think I genuinely think there's this feeling of like, if I do this wrong, not only is it potentially short-term harmful, but like I might just never know, because it may be that down the line when they're 50 and they get divorced, it's because of that thing with the shoes.
It's because of that thing, and they don't feel safe, and they didn't grow up in safety. Yeah.
And probably they're going to tell you, I think it's just the data does not suggest that those things they're not that easy to mess up,
I just think it's all going to make a great story. Those little things are going to make a great story at your wedding, when we're all like laughing about the time your mom threw your shoes at you because you were
totally
being unreasonable and you wouldn't get out the door. Like, my parents were like totally like no corporal punishment ever. Like like they were not spankers, nothing like that. But one time my brother would not get in the bath. He must have been like 3. And my mother like whacked him with a washcloth while he like ran through the hallway. And I still remember, it's like still like a core memory of like a naked 3-year-old with someone being like, you could sort of see why you would just be like, get in the bath. Of course. I have a core memory of my dad just giving me a little push on the bottom when I wouldn't get into the orange Honda Civic with the big brown stripe on it, the big brown racing stripe in the 70s. Yeah. And we talk about it all the time. But it's,
you turned out fine. You made something of yourself despite that.
Yes, in general. Like, I think it's almost like what we were saying about science. It's like you're making the best decisions that you can make in the moment. And I always tell my children, I'm like, hey, I did the very best I could at all times with the information I had. So,
Yeah, and I also think I worry sometimes about this level. I worry a lot about these sort of people's level of anxiety, because I feel like it can get in the way of kind of having fun. And if you're thinking about all of your moments with your kids as opportunities to either mess up or make them better, you kind of miss the moments that are just like, this is just like an opportunity to just like sit around and like, we're not making it better. We're not making it worse. We're just like hanging out.
Hanging out. It's okay to just hang out. Not every moment has to be a teaching moment. And it can't always be, because that actually is a terrible life.
It's exhausting.
That's not fun at all. Just going back to RFK for one sec, because you have to.
Who doesn't love it?
Oh, God. Listen, if I had a television show right now, I would talk nonstop about RFK Jr. because he makes me crazier than almost anyone. Just emboldening, just empowering a lot of people to quote unquote be doing their own research that's not kind of based in anything. And it has really empowered people to be their own mini unprofessional amateur scienticians. And I don't know how to undo that. Like, the population of flat earthers is really growing. It's strengthening. It's growing and growing. It's actually wild.
So I think RFK has tapped into something which is very real, which is people feeling that they have that the things that they care about in their health space are being dismissed.
Right.
That like they don't feel listened to by their doctors or by other experts. And he's kind of giving people the impression like, you can do your own research, you can figure out, you can make your own decisions. But I think what's tricky, what obviously I really object to about that is that there's a difference between, you you can be listened to and someone can sort of absorb what you feel is important and listen to your fears and engage with them. There's a difference between that and like everybody can literally do their own data analysis, because that's a skill that you learn over time. And the thing for me that drives me crazy is the number of like studies that these guys come up with that are just so deeply flawed, but it's like it's hard to explain to someone without the jargon of academia, like why the study is so bad. And that, that's what I spend all my time on, is kind of trying to help people understand. But like, you can't, there's a million of these. Any idiot can put together a bad study. And then, I have to explain, well, that study's really bad.
Right. Yeah. And it's actually very hard for people to ingest the message that they might be wrong. Like, I think that people feel so firm in their beliefs and they don't want to be told they're not correct, which is it kind of deepens the problem.
I think that's right. I think people really like to be listened to.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. People like to feel that the things that they care about are being paid attention to, as they should. Right. as they should. But once you've gotten into some set of beliefs, it can be very hard to pull people out. And I think we have kind of forced people into these camps, which has made it very difficult for people to hold sort of one belief. And, like I wrote about this a couple of years ago, but, if you asked me, like a lot of people who drink raw milk also don't vaccinate for measles.
Right.
And the thing is that like drinking raw milk, like it isn't necessarily a choice that I would make, but, the risks are relatively small. They're not zero, but, pasteurization is a great thing. I think it's awesome. But, raw milk from your local farm, the vast majority of the time is going to be fine. Whereas not getting the measles vaccine is really very bad, because measles is a very contagious disease that can kill you. And so I think we've kind of lumped those people and made them feel as if, if you're a person who drinks raw milk, like you're a crazy nutter, so you might as well just not get the measles vaccine, as opposed to telling people, well, these things are both kind of have some risks, but one of them is actually, substantially more risky than the other so it would be okay to be a person who was measles vaccinated, but also has raw milk.
Right. It's so interesting when, like, I think just kind of public policymakers must constantly have to weigh just kind of like the discussion about raw milk is actually perfect, because the risk is pretty low. Like, if you know the farm, familiar with the farm, it's probably okay. You're probably known people who drank raw milk and they were fine. I've tried it. I thought it literally tasted like the teat of a cow. Like, I did not like it. But I did taste it.
Some people like it.
Some people like the taste of a cow's teat. Others do not. But on a public policy level, you're always trying to do the most for the largest group of people, right? Like, you're trying to make safe the largest amount of people that is physically possible. And so you kind of like make a rule, and you're like, well, we pasteurize the milk. Can't just sell raw milk anywhere. It's a public health decision. It serves the most people most of the time. But there's always going to be exceptions to that, which really like engenders this kind of like distrust of the whole organization.
Yeah. Public health rules are really easy to communicate. And if everyone were a robot, I think we can sort of agree in that case that, if everyone were going to do exactly what you said, it would be better to tell people, drink pasteurized milk, because there are a small number of, because raw milk is slightly riskier. I think where it gets tricky, the messaging gets more tricky, is when you are telling people, is when the experience of telling people that here is the rule, that then they get some feedback that is not consistent with that rule, and then they start to question it. And then you've kind of lost them. And I think that sort of tension is inherent in the fact that you're communicating to people who are learning from their own experiences, not just robots.
Right. And that's why we should all drink cow colostrum. I'm just kidding.
Right. Do you not take bovine colostrum?
Oh, man, of course. No, I take it right from the source. I push that calf out of the way.
For perimenopause, you just get right in there or whatever.
Well, your head must spin when you enter the conversation around perimenopause, because the trash science is beyond belief, actually.
The supplements that are recommended. So many supplements. I'm not really a supplementer. I'm not really a fan of supplements.
I also am not a fan of supplements. I'm just not a fan of really taking stuff that was like compounded in a place far, far away with a mystery ingredient.
You don't know what's in it. Could be anything.
I don't know what's in it. I think it's pencil shavings for the most part. But just kind of people, and when people are confused and when they are lost in their own health concerns, like the grift, it just fills that vacuum. When there's a vacuum of information, and there was a vacuum of information, particularly in the women's health space, because science didn't really study our bodies in a very meaningful way for a lot of years. And we didn't really talk about perimenopause. And now there is a large contingent of grifters, I feel, just like entering the chat.
And people want to be told things they can do, and ideally things that are straightforward, that are like they're relatively easy. I think and the things that have a little bit of evidence behind them then get sort of magnified, right? Like
they do.
Like, it's a good idea to eat some protein. Without it, you will die. And that's sort of turned into like, everybody needs to have a David bar and a protein shake 12 times a day to get their macronutrients or whatever.
And, and testosterone, like
boy,
good Lord.
It's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other conversation for
another
other day.
Episode.
It makes my heart race just kind of thinking about it. Okay. Oh God, we have to talk about Brown University, because you're a professor at Brown, and we know that guns, good Lord, we know that they are the number one cause of death in kids. And why can we not care about that? Why can our leaders not make meaningful change in that space?
I think gun law changes have proven to be very challenging.
Yeah.
Very challenging. And, one of the things we know about guns is that they're the leading cause of death for kids. Mm-hmm. And it is mostly not things like what happened here, even though that is the scariest. And, it was like incredibly, unspeakably terrible. But it's mostly not mass shootings. It's mostly guns that people have in their houses, or, gun violence, sort of more almost what we'd call like routine gun violence. And so I think the challenge is not just the question of how do you prevent mass shootings, which I think people agree is difficult, although could be easier if there were fewer guns, but also how do you just generally, how do we limit firearm exposure?
Right.
And that's just really hard.
Just really hard. It's almost so hard.
It's not hard to imagine what to do, but it seems hard politically.
Hard politically when really all of the data kind of points to a way to make it a little better. Like if people couldn't just so freely access weapons of war. Anyway, it's hard to even talk about, and I'm so sorry, and I can't imagine the conversations that are happening around Brown right now as everybody kind of prepares to go back.
We are lucky to have a very, very wonderful president at the top who has been really thinking a lot about what people are going to need, but I think it's going to be a tough spring.
Really tough spring, of course. How do you feel about phone bans in schools? We have implemented those across New York public schools.
Good.
Yeah, I do too.
I feel good. So I think this conversation for me has gotten a little bit confused. But fundamentally, I think phone bans in schools are a very good idea. I think one of the issues with the conversation is we've kind of conflated phone bans with schools with this more general question of like not giving kids and teenagers access to phones, and with sort of blaming access to social media for large declines in mental health.
Right.
I think that evidence on the mental health declines those effects are probably smaller than sort of people have in their minds. But school phone bans make sense because third period is not a time you need to get notifications from ESPN about different trades. You can find out like that, Novak Djokovic left the Professional Tennis Players Association. You like find that out later at the end of the day.
Right.
And so I think what has happened, the value of the phone ban in school is just that like it like doesn't distract kids from what they're supposed to be doing. And if you have a bell-to-bell ban, which a lot of places have, I think there's a lot of at least anecdotal discussion about, the ways that kids are interacting with each other between classes that I think is really, really good for, emotional development. So I am a fan of phone bans. I'm excited to see in the next probably 2 years, my guess is we'll start getting really pretty good data about the impact of those bans on test scores, but also on other things.
I think it is I'm sure it'll be like the data effects will be very evident, but it also is sort of just a common sense approach that you could imagine. Like people really don't need their USDA information while they're in chemistry class. Yeah. All these things.
Yeah, and I think the other, they were sort of my kid's school goes from very little until 12th grade. And they had a phone ban in the middle school until like through middle school the whole time. And then only this year is like the first year of the phone ban in high school. When they were talking about having a phone ban in high school, one of the things that came up was like, how will people, kids have their schedules on their phone. They have some very complicated, like 8-day rotating schedule,
Sure.
I don't even know, whatever, of course. And they're like, how are people going to know where to go to class? It was like, well, like paper. It was like just paper. And I think a lot of these, it's like, I used to get to class like every day, and I like in high school, and I didn't have a phone. And so it's like, I don't know how they'll do it, but I'm telling you, I think it is possible. It's happened before.
I know a lot of parents were like, how will I get in touch with my child while they're in school?
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's like call the office.
Call the office? Like, it seems easy. It seems like you don't want to be talking to them.
First of all, why are you calling? Why do you need to be in touch with them? Why do you need to be in touch?
Take this break. Take this break for yourself.
I think it is the biggest objectors to phone bans have been parents, typically.
Yes.
Who want to get in touch with want to know that they can get in touch with their kids. And then, and then there are some kids who will object also. But of course. But I actually think parents have been a much louder set of voices.
Yeah, they really have. Oh my gosh, what a fun conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Thoroughly enjoyable. Well, you have a lot to contend with out there.
It's going to be an interesting 2026.
It's going to be a robust 2026.
We're going to do it. It's going to happen.
Yeah, it is.
It's going to happen.
That was Emily Oster, and I had no choice but to look up one thing. We were talking about New Year's resolutions, and I had to know how long people have been doing them for. Okay, one of the earliest mentions of them was in a Boston newspaper in 1813, but some point back to traditions akin to resolutions as far back as 2000 BC. What? Okay, we are really needy. Human beings are very needy. All right, thanks for joining us. I'm Samantha B. We will see you next week for some more choice words. Thank Thank you for listening to Choice Words, which was created by and is hosted by me, Samantha B. The show is produced by Svea Baron-Reinstein with editing and additional producing by Ryan Connor. We're distributed by Lemonada Media, and you can find me at RealSamB on Instagram. Follow Choice Words wherever you get your podcasts or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership.